Ashley. It's good to see you again. How have you been since our last session?
Good. I'm celebrating 10 years sober next week.
Wow, that's a long time. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. It's been a long road.
So, is that 10 years sober off heroin or off everything?
10 years clean from heroin. I haven't smoked weed in a couple of years now, and I seldomly drink.
That's awesome. But do you find other forms of drugs or alcohol to be tempting to your past heroin addiction?
In the beginning, I couldn't do any form of drugs or even drink without wanting to go shoot up. But once I had about 5 years under my belt, I rarely had the urge to go get high, and I could enjoy a drink or two or even the occasional joint. But pain pills and IV meds are still a struggle since it's the same kind of high where you nod out.
What do you mean by not out?
Nodding out is where you get so high that you can't even keep your eyes open and everything around you disappears and you just melt.
That sounds intense. Was it like that every time you got high?
Yeah, that is why it's so hard to stop once you head down that rabbit hole. People say they're always chasing their next high, but nothing ever compares to how intense that first time is.
I saw in your chart that you were recently in the hospital for a few days, and they administered IV pain meds. How did the IV pain medication compare to the heroin?
The stronger medications they were giving me is close, but not quite.
How has that affected your sobriety or your mental status?
When they first gave me medications, it caused me to flashback. But instead of craving more like I used to, it gave me an anxiety attack because I didn't want to go back to that life.
What do you mean by go back to that life? And can you describe what that was like?
I began only using pills. A friend said, let's try this. So I snorted it. That was heroin. That same night, that same friend shot me up and my life changed. I had a job before that night. I was a great mom before that night. I was a great daughter before that night. But when I woke up the next day sweating and puking until I got my next fix, I realized there wasn't anything I wouldn't do to get that next high. I would sell anything that wasn't bolted down, steal, lie, leave my kids alone. By the time I asked for help, my house was gross, the kids were neglected, and I had CPS and the cops looking for me.
Who did you turn to for help in that situation?
I asked my mom for help, but she was recovering from an injured knee and didn't know what to do, so she called the police.
Was your mom aware of how bad your addiction had gotten?
My mom didn't even know I was using drugs. And when I finally got the courage to ask her for help, I was so mad for so long that she called the cops instead of trying to get me into rehab or something.
So what happened with the cops and CPS?
Well, CPS took my kids and put them into foster care until a judge granted temporary custody to my mom. The cops, I took off running with my boyfriend, and it took them about a week to find me. I was arrested and ended up spending 18 months in prison and then was on probation for a while. While I was in prison, by state law, my rights were terminated to the kids, and it took a lot of additional court hearings, supervised visits, and several other hoops to get them back.
How old were the kids when you got in trouble?
The twins were 5 and my youngest was 2.
And how old were they when you got to see them again?
The twins were 8 and my youngest was almost 5. I missed most of the milestones that I can never get back.
Do the kids ever bring up the past or make you feel guilty about your substance abuse?
They all have, in some way, shape, or form. But because of me, they had to endure a lot of suffering, so I don't blame them.
Well, hopefully they are proud of how far you bounced back. While you were in prison, how was your recovery process?
It was rough. Detox is always rough, but especially when you do it with no medication or no medical staff.
And what was the withdrawal process like?
It was rough. I felt like I was gonna die for about a week straight. I was sweating, puking, spiking fevers, even had a couple seizures.
So there was no one there to help you through the withdrawal symptoms?
Other than my cellmates, nope. The guards refused to respond. The only time anyone intervened is if someone stopped breathing or had no pulse.
That's extreme. Did they have any form of NA meetings at least?
Yes. They had both NA and AA meetings along with church services. And since there wasn't much else to do, everyone attended.
Did you have a good support system to go back to whenever you were released from prison?
No, not at all. My parents didn't visit, allow me to write, call, nothing. So I was in work release, working at Sonic when I was still in prison. And I met this guy that was halfway mentally handicapped. And I had to be released to his house from prison because I had no one else.
So how did you cope with not having a support system or anyone else to talk to help you stay sober?
I slowly began making phone calls to my grandma and my mom and my dad. And in the meantime, I jumped from relationship to relationship until I almost died from one of my boyfriends beating me up so bad. So I swallowed my pride, called my dad for him to come and get me. But I always looked back to see how bad it was, and anything was an improvement. If I wouldn't have gone to prison, I would be dead right now.
So how come you had to swallow your pride to call your dad?
My dad literally returned any sent mail to the prison. It was like if I was dead to him. He's always been very critical of me and judges everything I do. So for me to call him and be willing to live under his roof was tough for me to do.
So did your relationship eventually improve with your dad?
For a while. But I ended up getting a roommate and we had our own place. But now me and my dad are pretty great.
Do you think that your reflection on your past and how bad it was is a foundation for you to push forward and stay sober and live the best version of your life now?
Definitely. I believe everything happens for a reason. And if I wouldn't have been through what I have been, then I wouldn't be able to help the people I do. I also truly believe that I would still be living that life, and that pushes me to want to do better and to accomplish every goal I set for myself. I set small goals and big ones, and now I'm on the fast track to being an owner of the company I work for, and I have my kids in a huge house where everyone has their own room.
When you were still living with your addiction, did you ever feel like you would be as successful as you are now?
No way. Back then, I didn't know if I would be able to pay my rent or even food for the next day. And now I have good credit. We're getting ready to go on vacation. When you are so far gone like I was, it's hard to see anything else except for how you're going to get more drugs and how you're going to use those drugs. There are no future plans.
So what would be some advice for someone who is just starting the recovery process?
Probably that no matter how grim or hopeless the situation you are in might be, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. And if you put in the work day by day, you will be celebrating your 10 years before you know it.
Do you feel like coping with a substance use disorder is difficult?
Yeah. Some people are more prone to addiction than others, but you have to learn new coping skills and what works for you, and have a reliable and sober-free support system. Recovering addicts cannot succeed if they don't change their people, places, and things.
So, as a recovered addict, do you feel like it's helpful to attend counseling?
I think it's important to attend your 90 meetings in 90 days. After that, weekly counseling and maintaining a support system is crucial. But now, 10 years into my sobriety, I feel like I get more out of helping others that are in my previous predicament instead of attending counseling for myself.
Okay. What goals do you have for therapy for yourself moving forward?
I would say to work on my stress and anxiety mostly, but also to work through my self-esteem issues.
All right. I would like for you to begin a journal, and I would like for you to document triggers that lead up to your stress or anxiety, and to make detailed notes about the time, day, and weather and circumstances that you may face. And I'd like you to bring that back with you next week so we can work through it and set goals that will determine specific mechanisms when we can form a coping thing to handle everything.
Sounds great. Same time next week.
Yes. See you Wednesday at 1 p.m.
Okay.